Democratic Congressman Haley Stevens of Michigan spoke to CBS News yesterday in what was her first television interview since losing her state's Democratic Senate primary to Abdul El-Sayed earlier this week.
Everything that needed to be said in the primary was said. All right. I'm a Michigander. You know, the differences were aired out. And look, we all know it's a big tent party. That's the Democrats' mantra. The things important for Michigan: lowering costs, standing up to the abuses of power, the healthcare agenda. You know, we're in agreement. But the deal is that no American is my enemy. No Republican is my enemy. You know, no Democrat is my enemy. We got to cut this stuff out. We got to start working together.
Haley Stevens saying right there that she is moving past the primary disagreements and is ready to help El-Sayed get elected this November. The New Republic is out with a new piece conceding that some of the far-left Democratic nominees could lose this November, but warns moderate Democrats that they should not actively work to make that happen. As for Republicans, new reporting this morning from Axios reveals that the GOP are planning to use their first ever midterm convention next month to mount a sweeping, made-for-primetime case that Democrats have become captive to the party's activist left. You can see how these stories are linked. So let's right now bring in the two authors of the pieces. Editor of the New Republic, Michael Tomasky, is here, as well as senior political reporter for Axios, Alex Eisenstadt. MS Now's Ali Vitale, I'm happy to say, still with us as well. My thanks to all of you. Michael, let's start with your piece in which you warned Democrats not to go against some of their more far-left nominees in the upcoming midterms. You write, in part, this: I have my own reservations about aspects of the left's renaissance. Defund the police and eliminate the border and, sure, throw in cancel Thanksgiving are disastrous stands for anyone seeking office to take. Big D Democrats shouldn't come within a mile of some of those national DSA platform positions. But overall, far and away, the most important thing politicians can do in this country over the next 10 or 20 years is reverse the concentration of wealth and political power that has characterized this polity's last 4 decades and make working people's lives better and more hopeful. Any ally in that fight, however, they want to fight within obvious lawful and constitutional limits and under whatever label that should be welcome. So, Michael, I think you're right. I mean, we certainly the phrase is, don't let perfect be the enemy of good is, I think, applicable here. I think there are a lot of Democrats Michigan's a great case for this. And Stevens saying all the right things right now. And so is El-Sayed about bringing the party together. But yes, there are some who think, well, the far left doesn't stand for me, or the moderates don't stand for me. I can't support that. The risk of that approach, though, is you're simply empowering Donald Trump and his Republicans.
Well, bingo. I think that's exactly right, Jonathan. And, what's the point of the midterm elections from the Democrats' perspective? It's to elect more Democrats than Republicans and to recapture the House and recapture the Senate. If you're a moderate Democrat, I understand you're not crazy about some of Abdul El-Sayed's positions. And by the way, if you're a progressive Democrat, you're not crazy about all the positions of some moderates who've won primaries. But as Haley Stevens just said, it's a big tent party with more than 2 factions, 3 or 4 factions, actually. And if they want to win and take power and try to do something for the American people and do some of the things that I talked about in that one section of the piece, where I think their big job is to reverse the concentration of economic and political power that's gone to the wealthy in this country over the last 4 decades. They need to work together. They need to elect Democrats, and they need to just put aside these differences and concentrate on what they agree on. I think Haley Stevens gave a great statement. Yeah, and certainly the polls suggest that they've got the wind at their backs, but never underestimate Democrats' the ability to overthink things, potentially blow it. Alex, Republicans understand that they're have a weaker hand right now. They can read the polls, so they're trying to come up with something new. And you've got new reporting on this midterm convention. It's sort of the first of its kind. Tell us more about it. Who's going to be there? Who's going to watch? And what are the Republicans going to say?
Sure. In some respects, it's going to feel like the Republican National Convention of 2024, except in this case, what you're going to have is a Republican National Convention that's going to be focused on turning this election from a referendum on Donald Trump and his policies of the last 2 years into a choice between Trump and Democrats. And so what they're going to try to do is they are going to paint Democrats as socialists, as far left and far outside the mainstream. You're going to hear them talk a lot about El Sayed, about James Tallarico, and about other Democratic figures that they say are far left and that they want to then tie other Democratic candidates to running up and down the ballot this fall. That's a big way, that's a big part of what Republicans say is going to be their playbook for winning this fall.
When you say to them, Alex, as I'm sure you do, because these are some of the conversations I have as well with Republican strategists, okay, it sounds like you're trying to make midterms a referendum on the party that's not in power, which is, of course, typically not how midterms go. Republicans, in theory, did a lot of legislating this year. Why are they not campaigning on that? And what does it tell you, or what do they tell you, when you say, is it just a referendum on socialism, which is just a small section of the Democratic Party?
So here's the challenge that Republicans face, Allie, which is that there are a lot of things that passed in that big, beautiful bill about a year ago. There are other things that Republicans have done legislatively. But when you look at the polling, voters overwhelmingly feel like they haven't seen the economic benefits of the Republican Party's policies. And so Republicans have this job to do over the next couple of months, which is to educate voters and to talk to voters about what they've done from a domestic policy perspective and how that's helped them. The problem is that voters right now, all they're hearing about is the war in Iran, and they're not convinced that what Republicans have done, and broadly, they're not convinced that it's helped them with their wallets.
No, I definitely think that's true. I've heard it from voters. I hear it from sources as well. And Michael, I think then it puts the ball back in Democrats' court of, I've spoken to many who feel that they really have the wind at their back at this moment. Issues that Trump previously was beating them on, the economy, immigration, now upside down for him and Republicans. They're hoping to take advantage of that. But I also think they now have a new charge of combating some of the more fringe ideas that are percolating. You mentioned in your piece, cancel Thanksgiving, do not come for my stuffing. But that's, of course, a reference to Francesca Hong, who is likely to be the Democratic nominee for governor in a battleground Wisconsin. And she is a Democratic socialist. So what should Democrats be doing, and what are the conversations you're having with them about the ways that they want to be specific about what it means to be a Democrat right now?
Well, they don't want the election to be a referendum on Thanksgiving, obviously. That's number one, or anything like that. I use that metaphorically. Yeah. They want to say that what they really mean here is that they want to take on corporate power. They want to tax the rich. They want to talk about affordability. They want to talk about housing. They want to talk about health care. They want to talk about things like that. That's their positive agenda. That's what they really want to say. So that's how they want to reframe it whenever they get accused of being extremists. They want to say that we're talking about returning economic power to middle and working class people. That's what they want to say. And then, of course, the main thing, Allie, is that they do want to keep the focus on Trump and the Republicans. I think it really has broken through here in the last month or so that the war, the tariffs, and other decisions that Trump has proactively made have made the economy worse and raised prices. Just keep talking about that.
It was Trump's signature campaign promise. He's broken it. Editor of The New Republic, Michael Tomasky, and senior political reporter for Axios, Alex Eisenstadt. Our thanks to you both very much. Both of these new pieces available online now.